How's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be talking about Annabelle. This is from 2014 and is the first spin-off from The Conjuring, hence the tagline, "Before The Conjuring, there was Annabelle." Anyway, from 2014, directed by John R. Leonetti, and stars Annabelle Wallis, which I always thought was kind of fun that Annabelle is, the main actress is actually Annabelle, so that was pretty cool. Also, Annabelle Wallis would later go on to work with James Wan again in Malignant. She was the main girl in that one, and if you guys haven't seen Malignant yet, definitely check it out. James Wan at his craziness and a great tribute to 80s horror. Definitely check it out. This movie also stars Ward Horton and Alfre Woodard, and also the original Conjuring director, James Wan, does return as a producer, so even though he's not directing this one, he does still have his involvement in it, which is pretty cool. In this one, you get a young couple expecting a baby when one night they hear a scream from their neighbor's house, and it turns out their daughter, Annabelle Higgins, who left and joined a cult, has come back with her boyfriend to kill her parents. And when they discover this, Annabelle and her boyfriend attack them, but luckily they're saved by the police. When Annabelle dies, she bleeds on this doll, and we see a drop of blood go into the doll's eye. Afterwards, life attempts to go back on track when they're haunted by mysterious visions. The doll appears to be moving. Annabelle Higgins' ghost appears to be there, both her child form and her adult cultist form. But there also appears to be something else, something deeper and darker haunting their house, and they have to figure out how to get rid of the evil spirits. Overall, when you look at The Conjuring, the Annabelle prequel really does make sense. The Conjuring was a huge smash hit, and everybody really liked it, and you had Annabelle as the character from the prologue, and it was a really popular character, and Annabelle didn't really get that much screen time in the original Conjuring. And also, you don't know Annabelle's origins. The nurses that get her initially don't really know where she came from. So, popular movie, underutilized but popular character, and an origin story that you could really go anywhere with. Yeah, an Annabelle prequel really does make sense. And they did this one, and regardless of what critics thought, it was successful, and it got 2 sequels of its own, but also opened the floodgates for more Conjuring spin-offs and created the Conjuring Cinematic Universe. If this wasn't successful, Conjuring would just have a few mainline films, but because we got spin-offs, we have a whole universe. So yeah, this movie, pretty important. But you know what I said about initial reception? Yeah, oh man, I actually went back and I looked at some of the older reviews that came out around the time that the movie was released, and boy, YouTube back in 2014, very much in the best movie ever, worst movie ever mindset, and if you had just listened to some of these old reviews, you would have thought that this would have been like the worst movie ever. Critics really, really tore this apart, not just on YouTube, but also elsewhere. The thing is, though, Annabelle, while it's not near as good as The Conjuring, and when you look at the whole Conjuring franchise, it's definitely one of the weaker films, but all that being said, it's fine. It's got some really good moments in it, and also it is really cool to see the Annabelle character more, It's definitely something that needed expansion, and I always thought that, why Annabelle wasn't the best, it was still pretty good, and I think, ironically, it didn't get thought of as the best because of what it spun out of. You see, when James Wan did Insidious, and then later on he did The Conjuring, that was really a 1-2 punch that changed ghost movies forever. there was a lot more interest in the subject all of a sudden, and a whole lot of people were taking notes from Wan's film to try to make better ghost movies. It was a huge upgrade for ghost movies. And in turn, when you compare the two films, yeah, Annabelle is definitely not near as good as The Conjuring, but that's a tough act to follow. I mean, trying to mimic Wan, you know? So yeah, it's not as good, but if this movie had come out on its own like 10 years earlier, I mean, Annabelle was an established character before The Conjuring, you know, you can actually go see the real one. So if it had come out on its own back in 2004 instead of 2014, this movie would have been remembered a lot more fondly and people would have been way more scared of it. But the thing is, Insidious, Conjuring, ghost movies just getting so good, it's spinning off of something that is very, very hard to do, you know, as good as the original, you know? But I think if you take it for what it is, you say it's a spin-off film, you know, don't expect it to be as good as Conjuring. It's fun, you know, it's got some good moments, especially towards the end when you see more of the spirit behind it. You get to the basement scene, things start to heat up. So yeah, I never felt this was the best film ever, but the critics of the time, everyone's saying it's like the worst thing ever. Nah, it's fine. But I guess I should address that. The key difference is why The Conjuring's so great and why Annabelle's okay. Two major faults with this. Character and scares. Character, first off, The Conjuring did character so well. Ed and Lorraine Warren, played by really good actors, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, and you really got the sense that the two deeply loved each other, and they really wanted to help people out and do the best for the world. Great characters, and then the family that they're helping seemed really realistic and relatable, and all the characters in the first Conjuring, really cool. And then you get these characters who are not bad, they're fine, but they're not near as good, again, a tough act to follow, as the characters from The Conjuring. This is a young couple, he's a new doctor, he's trying to get in good with the doctor crowd and he's establishing his early career, and she's having their first baby and wants, you know, everything to go right. You know, you like them, they're good enough characters, you want them to succeed, but there's just something missing. They're just not quite as lively, not quite as relatable, and it's hard to say why, but, you know, it's just not quite that level that The Conjuring was at. But also, side characters. The Conjuring had a relatively large cast with the whole family, but also you get characters like their equipment tech and the sheriff. Here, you have two side characters, so essentially 4 people in this movie. A relatively small cast, which in retrospect, yeah, we could have definitely gone for some more characters here. And the 2 side characters are good enough. A priest and a lady who owns a bookstore that becomes like their only friend. They're good enough, but they're not as defined, you know? You find out like the bookstore lady's backstory, and it's just, I wish I knew these characters better. There's potential, I just wish I knew them better. And it's like, you look at the first Conjuring, and the equipment tech and the sheriff had such a good back and forth between them, even though they were minor characters. And maybe that's it. Maybe there needs to be more humor. I mean, you know, they're having a baby, and they even, you know, you get to see the baby at, you know, the baby happens at about the 3rd mark. They could have done some humor with, oh, we don't know what we're doing, it's our first baby, how do we raise it? That could have been the doorway to a bunch of humor, and I think the humor, maybe that's it. Maybe that's why they're so relatable, is all the little jokes and the relatability factor. I don't know, but yeah, a smaller cast they could have done with more characters, and they're just not as relatable as the Conjuring characters. The second thing is the scares. The Conjuring escalation, you know, it starts off little, and then it gets to the point where it's crazy. Escalation and tension, and again, character that helps you feel for the scares, you know, because if you really like the characters, you don't want them to be in the scary situation. But I find with Annabelle, a few things that really, kill the scares. Well, obviously, the pacing isn't quite great. There's not enough build-up and not enough tension. But also, you have things that happen early on in the movie where the cult comes in and attacks the couple, and even the house catches on fire at one point. You have those big early things in the movie which aren't supernatural intrinsically, and then the ghosts have to come and be scary after you literally got stabbed by a cultist. It goes a little too big in the beginning, and then the scares are not quite, when it gets to the supernatural stuff, not quite as scary, so it doesn't have that proper escalation. And plus, the two locations, they start off in a house. It's their house, it's where they live, it's kind of a comfortable location, and it's not a super creepy house. And then they go to the new apartment, which is a scarier setting, but it's not like a really old, creepy apartment. The apartment could definitely be creepier, so not so scary house, not terribly scary apartment. It needed better atmosphere. It should have been an old, grungy, creepy apartment or something. So yeah, the atmosphere, you don't care as much for the characters, the scares just don't have the right tension, So yeah, when it comes down to it, characters aren't as good and the scares aren't as good. But overall, when it does eventually heat up, when you do get to the basement scene and the scene where she's scrambling up the stairs and lightning is striking everywhere, and when you actually see the spirit behind the Annabelle doll, it can get pretty creepy, and this movie does have its moments, and it does expand on a really cool character that, we only got to see a little bit of in the first Conjuring. So it does have its moments, but it's not near as good as The Conjuring. But like I said, when you see the reviews of the time, everybody saying, oh, it's the worst thing ever, it's not the worst thing ever, and definitely to prove them wrong, this movie did get 2 sequels and open the floodgates to the cinematic universe. So yeah, it definitely did lead to bigger and better things. The first sequel, Annabelle Creation, would actually become the only spin-off that critics respect as much as the 2 mainline ones. And then Annabelle Comes Home, a personal favorite of mine. I know the critics don't like it, but I love seeing like that ensemble of ghosts that Comes Home would bring. So yeah, it's not the best thing ever, but it's better than people give it credit for, and it paved the way for a cinematic universe that I really love, so I can't get too mad at it. So yeah, Annabelle, a little underrated, not perfect, but not terrible. Anyway, without further ado, I want to analyze this a little deeper, so I'm going to be talking a bit about the plot. I'm not going to be doing any major spoilers, but I do want to say my piece on a few plot points and make sure you guys have a basic understanding as to what the movie's about. I'll just be avoiding the end. Anyway, we open up with actually the opening scene from the first Conjuring. They remind you that the nurses found it and that they don't know where it came from, and then Ed and Lorraine would take it. But yeah, you don't know where it came from. That's what this story is going to be. But also, I like to point out that there is a block of text, but then after the block of text, we cut to the same shot of Annabelle's eye. And I do think it's kind of funny that The Conjuring and then the first one after, Annabelle, would share the same opening shot. I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, we jump back in time and we find out the origin story of Annabelle. We meet our 2 characters. They're nice people. He's a doctor, but he's a young, low-level doctor, and he's having to spend a lot of time away from the house, sometimes in conferences, sometimes just working really late at the night shift. He's a young doctor that's trying his best to advance his career and have a stable life with his new wife. And his wife is pregnant with their first child, and overall, they're, building their life together. Now, they have a little bit of a fight. He messes up a little bit, and in an effort to make amends, he says, hey, I got you this present. I was going to give it to you after the baby, but how about I just give it to you now? And she opens it up, and it's the doll that we would later know as Annabelle. obviously it doesn't have a name yet, but she opens it up and she goes, "Oh, you found the last doll to complete my collection," and she puts it on the shelf. And a few things here. Annabelle does look a little younger and a little newer. I do wish, that there was, like, specific damage and we got to see, like, how Annabelle would get that cut in her eye or whatever. But she's younger, she's newer, she's creepy, but not, super messed up looking yet, right? And she has a set, and there's 2 other dolls you see that go with her, which it always bugged me that these other dolls were a little smaller, and it felt the set wasn't proportional, but maybe it wasn't so much a set of 3 as in maybe it was like 3 different years the factory made them. I don't know, they all have the same dress, but the other 2 are a little smaller, and I wish they were the same size. But anyway, she puts it on the shelf, and she's happy again. And that's great. But one day the 2 are asleep in bed, and she hears a scream coming from the neighbor's house, and the guy gets up to go investigate. And this is one thing that I feel is a little bit underdeveloped here, because a lot of people say, oh, the guy's just an idiot to go and investigate by himself, but I feel that one of the themes that Annabelle sets up but doesn't really ever fully expand upon is the changing attitudes going into the 70s and how the 50s and 60s thought of things a little bit more differently. For example, earlier on in the movie, the guy opens up the door to his house, it's not unlocked, and he says, "Why would I lock it?" Later on, he's gonna lock his doors. And you hear about, say, the Manson murders on the TV, which is definitely an inspiration for the cultist element of this movie. But I feel like why he just goes over there is because this time was a little bit naive to the dangers of the outside world. And I feel like, when you go into the 70s, everything's gonna get grungy and the point of view of the world is going to change. And I feel like with the whole leaving the doorknob unlocked thing, that they started to talk about this, but it didn't really ever get fully fleshed out. So the idea that he goes over there to investigate because he couldn't possibly conceive of something horrible and unimaginable happening, that just kind of gets lost, and most people just think he's an idiot for following the scream. But anyway, he goes over there. The wife is following not too far behind, and he comes out of the house. "Honey, get back to our house. I'm going to call the police." And she runs back to the main house. The cultist, Annabelle Higgins, who has just returned home. She's an estranged daughter. She joined a cult. She came back. She killed her parents, and that's what the husband saw. And she, unbeknownst to the husband, has fled her parents' house into the next door house. So when he sends his wife home, she's accidentally sending her back into danger. And the boyfriend of Annabelle, which is like the only other cultist you see, which I kind of find it odd that there's only 2, but whatever. Annabelle's boyfriend stabs her, and it's looking pretty grim when the police show up and do eventually kill both cultists. And as they're wheeling her out, the wife turns and sees Annabelle dead, and she's made a strange mark on the wall, which actually looks pretty similar to the hitchhiker's mark from Texas Chainsaw, but whatever. She made a strange mark on the wall, and she bleeds a drop of blood that leads right in Annabelle's eye, which is definitely a more memorable shot of the film. I remember when I first saw it, that image of the blood just going into that little crack around Annabelle's eye and just seeping in. That's a good shot. But anyway, the baby lives, she lives, but the doctor says, for the sake of the baby, stay in bed as much as you possibly can, and she's bedridden and getting haunted by visions of young Annabelle Higgins, cultist Annabelle Higgins. The doll is starting to act up and move in different positions between when they see it, and you start to get the sense that there's something bigger going on too. And also I should like to point out, Annabelle moves mainly off camera, and a lot of the haunting is done by the spirits surrounding her. And I know that it's part of the subtlety, right? But I kind of wish we got more of Annabelle getting up and doing things, but you never see Annabelle move, and that seems to be like a rule of The Conjuring. But in turn, there's a creepy doll, but it seems more like a ghost movie than a creepy doll movie, and I wish we got to see Annabelle herself, referring to the doll, do more, but I guess that's the rules, is you don't have Annabelle be Chucky, so okay. But anyway, one night, the husband's away at a conference, all the burners turn on, there's some popcorn there, and it starts to go up just like Scream, right? And the house starts to burn down, and the wife barely makes it out, and all the stress causes her to have the baby a little early. The husband runs home and says, "I'm so sorry I was gone. I'm glad that you and the baby are okay. I'll do whatever you want," and she wants to move out. So they move into an apartment in the city. And I always kind of found it odd that they move out here. Like, I feel like it's because they moved in Insidious, and that's why they move in Annabelle. I don't know. The apartment is a better set. It's not quite as gothic and horrific as it could be, but it is creepier, and there is, like, the creepy basement and, you know, the creepy kids in the hallway drawing creepy pictures. It's a better set, I guess, but it's kind of odd we weren't there at the very beginning of the movie, you know? But anyway, they settle into the new place. Before they left, the wife threw Annabelle away, or had the husband do it, and when they open up their boxes, Annabelle's back. And another thing that people criticize the movie for is the wife is like, whatever, she's back. And they don't really do that whole trying to destroy Annabelle a million times. Usually when you have a haunted doll or a haunted book, you have to try to destroy it like 3 to 5 times before you give up. But here they're like, I guess the movers took them out of the trash can or something, whatever. It's just a doll, we shouldn't be silly about this. And that's another moment that people criticize, and I say whatever. But anyway, they think that life is going to go back to normal, and of course it doesn't. And once again, Annabelle doll, young Annabelle, cultist Annabelle, and the mysterious force behind everything are starting to give her strange visions of ghosts, starting to haunt her. But now we have the baby, and the baby serves as a good scare MacGuffin. Where did the baby go? Sometimes it just freaking disappears. Other times you're locked behind a door and you hear the baby there, and you're like, I gotta get in and save the baby, but the door is locked. So, good haunting shenanigans, and when you get to the basement scene, a really creepy scene where she goes down there and the elevator like won't let her leave, and you get the feeling that there's something else down there, and that's immediately followed by the stairwell scene where lightning's going crazy. After that, it starts to heat up, and seeing the actual spirit behind the doll, the scenes with that is always creepier, you know, so it does build up into the right direction. Again, not as scary as The Conjuring, but it does start to get better towards the end. And of course, they do have their 2 other characters. They meet a lady in the bookshop who also lives in their building, and the bookshop lady gives the kid a children's book, and they become best friends. And she, of course, knows a bit about the supernatural world and has supernatural books, and she'll try to help them out. And then you also get the priest who's going to do his best to keep Annabelle from acting up, which does lead to a relatively cool scene in a car later on. Overall, it gets better towards the end. It's not perfect, but the scares do heat up a bit. And yeah, the apartment set's kind of cool. A little bit Rosemary's Baby with the haunted apartment, but I thought is fine. You know, again, not as good as The Conjuring, but it does heat up. The only thing is, and I won't spoil it, the very ending of this movie just feels like, you know, all of a sudden, to defeat Annabelle, here's one thing we can do that just kind of springs up, and it does feel a lot like the ending to another famous horror movie, and that did bug me a little bit there. Overall, I felt the ending could have been a little stronger, and it kind of screws over this one character. I'm like, I don't know about that. But other than that, I feel that Annabelle is a bit underrated. Again, the way the critics thought of this, you would have you would have thought it was the worst thing ever. And I've seen a ton of horror movies, especially micro-budget and direct-to-video stuff, and trust me, this is perfectly fine. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it's a fun spin-off film, and if you view it as a spin-off, you view it as a side film, you view it as a little bonus, you know, and that's good, and it would lead to bigger and better things, because while I don't think this is bad, I think it definitely is on the lower end of the Conjuring franchise, and it would lead to films that I like much better, so I can definitely appreciate this for that. So yeah, not as good as The Conjuring, but it still has something going on, and it expands upon the Annabelle character, which definitely needed more screen time. And I mean, hey, it was popular enough that Annabelle got to the third movie before the mainline Conjuring movies did, and you know they're gonna make more with her. So yeah, kind of underrated, not a hidden gem, but still some good scares, fun apartment horror, fun, creepy doll, good ghost movie. Not the best thing ever, but I think it's worth a watch if you haven't seen it. Just don't expect The Conjuring, you know? Anyway, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my Conjuring Universe playlist. I've already talked about the 3 main entries, and I also did a complete physical media collection and talked about the tie-in comic, The Conjuring the Lover. So if you want to see me talk about more Conjuring stuff, you can find that at the bottom. Anyway, have a good day. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Conjuring playlist on the bottom. Have a good day now.